Good evening and welcome to another Cleveland Public Library, the Next 400 digital discussion. As always, your moderator, Chris Tanaka from 19 News with you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight's topic deals with education. As school kids head back to the new year, unfortunately, there are a lot of challenges facing them that they shouldn't have to deal with, and that leaders across Northeast Ohio will do their best to overcome in guiding these young boys and girls, men and women, through another successful, we hope, school year. I'm joined by two esteemed guests and professionals and leaders in our communities. Eric Gordon, he's the CEO of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, in charge of some 37,000 students, as well as Dr. Charles Smialek. He is the superintendent of the Parma Schools District, almost 10,000. Gentlemen, good evening to you both. Your microphones are muted. As soon as we welcome you in, we can begin this discussion. Eric, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Charlie, thanks for joining us as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity, Chris.
Gentlemen, we want to spend the bulk of this discussion talking about educational divides and gaps that may have either formed or gotten greater over the course of the pandemic, with some students being forced to learn at a distance, some dropping out of the academic system, and others just lagging behind due to unforeseen challenges through this. However, I'd like to begin with each of you catching us up on what your district has done and where you're at in regards to safety protocols and the beginning of school, which you both start on Monday. Eric, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure, thanks, Chris. So CMSD is going to begin the first 5 weeks of school with everyone wearing masks. That's students and adults, whether they're vaccinated or not. In addition, we're going to continue our temperature and wellness checks at our front door check-ins that we did last year. We will continue with care clinics. We will have a full-time health professional in every building. So there's a place for students who begin to show any symptoms of flu-like symptoms to self-isolate and receive medical care. We'll continue to use a 3 feet social distancing rule wherever it's possible, although we won't have any student that's not able to attend school because of that. But where possible, maintain that 3 feet. We'll continue the sanitizing efforts, having sanitation and wipes in the classrooms, fogging the classrooms after the school day with a sanitizer, and multiple hand washing and sanitizing throughout the day. We're also going to be running vaccine clinics again, like we did last spring, for everyone 12 and older, including their families. And we'll be doing random voluntary student COVID testing so that students can get a swab test. It's a Q-tip, not the long stick people have heard about, but a Q-tip in the nose, so that we can stay ahead of any possible cases of COVID. Our nurses are going to continue to run our COVID-19 hotline. So that means if there is a suspected case or a parent or student wants information, they have access to a registered nurse who will do the contact tracing and helping with any quarantining requirements. And then finally, we have on our website, as all districts in Ohio do, a COVID-19 case indicator dashboard so that the public and community can see the number of cases that are identified within our school community. And Chris, I would say there's been a lot of national attention about large urban districts like Cleveland and the mass quarantining you've seen in Tampa, New Orleans, and other places. I want to assure our community that our cases are very, very low. Last week, as an example of 1 week, we had 1 student case and 2 adult cases. So we are, because of the precautions, I believe, even with all the summer work we've done, we are seeing very, very low cases, and we'll continue to take those cautions for at least the first 5 weeks, and then we'll assess where we are at that point.
Yeah, best case scenario so far. Charlie, what about you?
We're almost identical to Eric, with the exception of the million-dollar question, which is whether or not we are mandating masks or not. Certainly, there's been quite a bit of emotion, in all honesty, and I'm not sure if Eric has felt this as well, maybe a little bit less so in Cleveland, but I felt like as we've gone through this, there's been more emotion behind masks, or not to masks, so to speak, than there was to be virtual or in person. It really has been an extremely emotional issue. Right now, we are not requiring masks. We are strongly encouraging masks. We've taken really the same verbiage that the Ohio Department of Health used, the CDC used, Ohio County Board of Health used, stopping just short of a mandate, and really encouraging families to mask. Everything else that Eric said is protocols that we're following as well. We have nurses in every building as well. We have a nursing supervisor that's accessible. I don't know how she's as accessible as she is. It seems like 24/7 for parents who have questions or a case that we might discover. We also are having a shot clinic. We have a kickoff this week at Byers Field, Saturday from 10 to 12. We look forward to welcoming new students, but also welcoming anyone who wants to come up, and whether you're a student or any affiliation with Parma City Schools or not. We have a vaccine clinic, no appointment necessary, obviously. We'll also be giving flu shots at that clinic as well. So hopefully it's a great resource for our community for folks who are not vaccinated. I would also echo Eric's sentiments. We haven't started school yet, but we've certainly had a great deal of fall athletes, approximately 800 students on our campuses for one sport or activity or another. And at this point, we've had 2 positive cases, actually both in the last couple of days. It has resulted in some quarantining. I would again encourage anyone who is watching to make sure that you do receive vaccinations, because vaccinations essentially almost do away with quarantining, and that's been a question that we ask, and we hope that parents are honest with us. We don't require proof, but we do obviously hope that parents are honest with us, and vaccinations will really help us to operate as close to normal as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Chris, if I can build on Charlie, I just want to share also our opportunities for our viewers. So for CMSD, our vaccine clinics will be at East Technical High School and Garrett Morgan High School next Thursday, August 26th from 2 to 5. On Friday, August 27th, they'll be at Ginn Academy and John Marshall High School. And then on Saturday, August 28th, they will be at Cleveland School of the Arts and Max Hayes High School from 10 a.m. to 2. We also are taking walk-ins, no appointments necessary. Any CMSD student and their family, 12 and older, and we'll be raffling off bikes, pro sport tickets, and Walmart gift cards to incentivize vaccination. So we'll make sure to get this over to you to share with your audience as well.
Absolutely. And of course, we will promote all of that. Gentlemen, that's an incredible start to this discussion. Charlie, you mentioned the passion behind the mask versus the no mask, but at the heart of the issue really for students, it's education. And learning in person has universally chorused from administrators and educators has greater value and, well, it's just better for the educational process. Describe that and what students benefit from being in person that they just simply can't get from distance learning.
And I appreciate, that prompt. I mean, we're still a people business. Relationships are always going to be a key to what teachers are able to accomplish with students. And relationships are more, they're not impossible to form virtually. And I think our teachers did an admirable job last year, learning digital tools, continuing to connect with our students in, as a variety of ways as they could possibly find. But at the same time, you miss some of that, so that organic conversation that happens when you're passing in the hallways, or that conversation that a teacher has with a student a couple minutes before the class begins. Those things can't really happen naturally on Google Classroom. You also miss, some of that informal assessment that's so key. And Eric is a much better pedagogical wizard than I am, but part of what we teach is that you assess and then you adjust instruction based on what you've seen, and a lot of that assessment in the classroom is informal. It's thumbs up or thumbs down, it's fist to five, it's just looking for those aha moments in kids' eyes, and really then kind of adjusting on the fly. That's the art of teaching, and we absolutely lost a lot of that last year. We don't base all of our success and all of our progress, that we're making on standardized test scores, but certainly we're down, and there was a dip, and I think that's going to be universal across school districts. And I think what that shows is, again, school matters. That in-person relationship matters. Those in-person aha moments, they can only happen, when you have that artist, that teacher in front of the classroom interacting with students. Those were absent last year, and I think we all felt it.
Yeah. Is there a hybridized plan and a full remote plan that you are keeping as a contingency for each of your school districts?
Eric, you want to take that first?
Sure. So just to build on what Charlie said about the importance of relationships, I think we also have to recognize that there were actually some students that thrived in the online environment that actually found less distraction. Now it wasn't the majority. Learning is a social experience. I mean, anybody who's ever been in a book club knows that you go to the book club not to take the literal quiz at the end of the chapter that you read, and to read silently, but you get to go to the book club to say, hey, did you get to the part where the person did this, right? That's that social experience. And social experiences are limited when some of your senses are taken away, when you can't touch things together, when you're not in that room together. So there is some limit to it, but there was also some students who really thrived because they were away from distractions at school, as an example. So CMSD wants our kids back 5 days, full days, starting Monday. We already have some kids back now, but we fully recognize that both with the pandemic still here, the shutdown's over, but the pandemic's not. And with some kids actually finding a better learning opportunity, that we have to have a remote option. And so we will be operating a remote school staffed by CMSD teachers. Those students will have scheduled classes just like they would in a live environment. So it's not the virtual, just do it anytime you want. And we have a number of students that have enrolled in that school. We also do have a virtual academy for that individual student that really thrives in really building his or her own schedule, his or her own strategy, and has that intrinsic motivation to move through it. So we're trying to offer an array, but even in that array, we are really stressing our primary choice is that your children are in school with our educators in the safe conditions that we've created, as we discussed earlier. These are secondary options only when the primary option just can't work for your family.
Yeah, and I would echo that sentiment exactly. We too have, folks that thrived in that environment, and just like Eric said, it's, I'm sort of a throwback educator. I mean, it's not how I would recommend. It's not how I want my own children to learn. But there are families who choose to stay remote, whether it's from a safety concern, and again, given the Delta variant, that's certainly become more of a concern in the last few weeks. Or because exactly Eric said, I mean, it does take away some of the, quote unquote drama that exists in a large high school of 1,500 kids. So right now we have approximately 280 kids in our virtual academy. We have another 160 or so on sort of a waiting list that we'll have to see how that shakes out and actually hire additional staff to support. We want to give families the option that they pursue. But again, we too encourage the in-person learning as much as possible. Right now, we're at about 5% who want virtual learning. Last year, we were at about 22% that stayed virtual for the entire year. So obviously a significant decrease as people want to get back. To answer your question about hybrid, this is something that we really will work, to avoid. We do have all the cleaning procedures, and if we had to go to a mask mandate, I think you would see that before we would go to any type of hybrid or a distance learning format. We do not foresee circumstances that can lead to that, but COVID has taught us to never say never. And Dr. Fauci had the quote that I always remember, and I've used a good number of times: the virus will set the timeline. And how right he was when he said that in I think it was really April of 2020.
And I would agree with Charlie that we are avoiding hybrid as well. We had 8,400 students that didn't return to even hybrid last year. Right now we're sitting at 570 in our remote school. So we're hoping, and we never know until the day that people show up, but we're hoping that those students all do come back live and in person. But I would say for the great effort that our educators made, hybrid was even more difficult in some ways than remote. For kids and adults alike. What am I doing on Monday and Tuesday live? What am I doing on Thursday and Friday remote? How am I supporting families in that middle day? So if we can avoid getting back into that space at all costs, we will.
Yeah, and look, anecdotally as a parent, I found that hybrid knocked our boys off their schedule, and the routine is people talk about is so vital for young children and teenagers to thrive. Eric, your school district, in addition to being the largest in our area, also has to contend with a lack of broadband penetration, poverty, and other challenges that some other school districts may not have to deal with as much. Can you describe for our viewers what happened last year with students who were able to thrive and stay with class and those who fell behind, and then talk about the challenges with closing that educational gap suffered by some of your students?
Yeah, so, as proud as I am to be a Clevelander, we have to face some tough facts. We have the highest childhood poverty of any major city in the nation. We have the worst digitally connected city of any major city in the nation, and we're the 9th most racially segregated city in the nation. And those factors were true before the pandemic, but they became, it made it impossible for people to pretend they didn't know these truths. People knew, but that made it impossible for people to look away. And, even before we could face education, we had to feed people. With 100% poverty, coded 100% poverty, our families depend on 10 meals a week per child from their school, 5 breakfast, 5 lunch from school. So when suddenly 2/3 of your meal plan got thrust back in your home, we had to feed people. We had to get people connected. And, a year and a half ago, when the shutdown occurred, we were literally printing content and mailing it to homes like the old-fashioned picture pages, because we had no way to get it to kids. We were running on CW43. We were running programming with you and your team, so that students could watch lessons. We had teachers teaching on Instagram because the kids had cell phone access but didn't have technology. So some real bleak realities. We've made a lot of gain, although candidly, this city has not yet solved the permanent infrastructure problem, but we have a partnership with Digital C, and we are converting the hotspots that we are paying for families into internet, and we're going to keep paying that as long as their children are enrolled in school, so that they can have high-speed internet for their whole family. We just announced a partnership with Charter Spectrum to add 5,300 more homes into our portfolio. So we've got our kids and families connected now. But that did leave a lot of lost learning time. So what's really critical, though, is that we have to understand kids did not lose learning. They still can learn to read. They can still learn chemistry. They can still learn everything they need. They lost time. And so you saw it in our summer experience, and you continue to see it as we go into this year, that we're going to focus on finish, enrich, and engage. Finish that unfinished learning. Enrich, which means no matter whether you were behind or ahead, everybody should be getting deeply invested in meaningful work that is worthy of their time, that they demonstrate their learning. And those who got to participate in summer learning even know about our demonstration of learning day, that we celebrated pieces of work that students have created. That will continue. And then engage. How do we reconnect that social and emotional, my friends, my making new friends, getting out of this isolation? So we're making deep investments in our Senate League athletics, our extracurriculars, our out-of-school time providers, so that extending art, music, and phys ed at our middle schools with a longer 0 period or 9th period day, so that they can start doing these kinds of enrich and engage activities. And you're going to hear and see us focusing on the America Rescue Plan, and the education package that came with it is a 3-year plan. We should not expect that kids are going to capture everything that happened to them in the last 15 months last summer, or even just this year, but that over the next 3 years, we need to continuously close the gap that was created by a 1.5 years of global disruption. So you're going to see this being a strategy in CMSD, and you've seen, hopefully, that we're really branding this as the CMSD experience, that we're coming out of this with you getting more, and it's around that finishing, enriching, and engaging.
And Charlie, to you, I pose the same question. What challenges did your district face? Was there an appreciable gap that formed with students, and how do you go forward and plan to overcome any deficiencies that surfaced during last year's interrupted learning time?
Yeah, ironically, somewhat surprisingly, I guess, we didn't have nearly the connectivity concerns that we had, or that we expected. Actually, we were ready with hotspots and provided to families, but again, out of approximately 9,400 students, we had maybe 50 or 60 actually request the hotspots, and our engagement rate online was actually very high. We had 97% of our students logging into Google Classroom on any day, on a daily basis. The issue was more completion of work, actually, and again, I think that's where that that relationship comes in, that arm around the shoulder. Hey, let's take a look at this, grade book here, and look at these missing assignments. I think that's where there was some breakdown. We too engaged in a very vigorous summer school, much more vigorous than we ever had before. It was all free. Eric mentioned, and I'm glad he did, the American Rescue Plan. I will say that, up until now, and unfortunately it took a pandemic really to see some of these investments. We would, any type of panel, it always seemed that we were, lamenting the funding of public education, and the federal government absolutely stepped up, absolutely stepped forward, and has given us really gracious sums of money to be able to bridge these gaps. Eric mentioned social emotional learning, and that's really where we've put a lot of our investment. We've hired additional guidance counselors, we've hired home liaisons, which connect our families to outside agencies or better connect whatever's happening at home. They help to troubleshoot what may be a barrier in student learning. We've gone ahead and expanded our extended care programming so that we have more opportunities for students in those areas. And then at the elementary level, we've shown class size. We've actually, despite the fact that we're approximately the same enrollment, we're up 12 full-time teachers. And that's, as of right now, we may go a little bit more based on what our online requests look like. So we're shooting for where kindergarten used to be 25 or 27, which we would all agree is quite a challenge. We're trying to use 20 as a divisor, and then just kind of count up from there. First and second grade is more lines along the lines of 22, and that allows teachers to really, as Eric talked about, intervene and enrich as necessary. It's certainly easier to tailor some individualized experiences to students when your class sizes are smaller. So I want to just really clearly state that we're very grateful for the federal government for stepping up, because it's an investment that certainly in my career we had not seen.
Wow. Yeah, and Chris, I would just share, building on what Charlie shared, I think Parma already was largely a technology using district before the pandemic. We were not. And so now that every student has a device, we have what other school districts have had in the past that will help us close the gap, which is if you go to class live with your teacher today, you also have, in our school district, it's called Schoology, but you have your online class that's connected to it so that you can continue learning anytime, anywhere. So kids can be getting the content in class and then going back into Schoology and accessing lots of digital content that their teachers can provide that they had no ability to do pre-pandemic. And that's another way that we can help our kids catch up. Pre-pandemic, my advanced placement computer science teachers were literally sending home what they called low-tech homework for computer science because kids couldn't code at home when they didn't have digital access. Suddenly, now my kids can do AP like they're doing it in Parma and other parts of the region. The other thing I would just stress is, differently than what Parma experienced, I had high school kids drop out or stop out in part because they went to work. When their parents' jobs evaporated, they went to work. And people often assumed that this must be a low engaged student, a poor performer. These were some of my very best students who were just making ends meet for their families. And our families also kept their 4- and 5-year-old at preschool and kindergartners at home. And so we have some targeted areas where we can be really intentional about how do we build back better over the next 3 years.
Yeah. You're talking about a lot about the students. Obviously, that's central focus here. I'd like to ask you guys some leadership questions. First and foremost, how do you balance being nimble with perhaps oversteering the ship when you're in such dire straits? I think you've both done a marvelous job, and that's why I love hearing from you. And it's fascinating to me what you've both been able to accomplish for your students and parents and districts. But from a leadership standpoint, I would love to just be a fly on the wall and listen to how you come to these decisions, not only that you've made, but also going forward. Eric, go ahead. Go first.
Well, I would start by saying we rely really heavily on each other. So Charlie and our first string colleagues and I met every week from the beginning of the shutdown until literally we switched to every 2 weeks last week. But we have literally hung together and said, how are you handling this? Let's think this out together. What's working in your community, sharing. And so the leadership among the area superintendents here has helped me personally, and hopefully we've been able to help them as well. And I just credit that a ton to good decision making. Inside our district, we we actually led with a strategy that every message you would hear from us was going to demonstrate bounded optimism and deliberate calm. And so if you go back and look at every single message, the tone of the message was, it's going to be okay, and here's what we're going to do to help people, manage their emotions about what they're going through. And then thirdly, for us, we were very clear, and you saw it again in our conversation about our health protocols, to name that this is going to be our strategy for this amount of time. And we will come back to you before that window runs out to tell you what's next. You were talking about kids needing structure and stability. All of us thrive on that, and particularly communities that feel often most harmed or jarred. And so by saying to my community, here's what's going to happen in the first 5 weeks, even if they don't like it, they know. And that creates some security. And so we will continue to chunk and say, okay, in week 3, here's what's going to happen for the last part of the quarter. So you can prepare for it now. You can think about it ahead. So I think the collaboration and collegiality among all of us was so critical, that deliberate calm and that bounded optimism that signals that we're going to be okay. And then being really clear in our case to create as stable of an environment in instability were the keys that we used.
Remarkable. Charlie?
Yeah, I just asked Eric to forward me all the emails of the stuff he's doing. So.
And then they do the opposite.
Again, some hokey leadership terms. I've always thought core values really matter. We've always tried to, be about some very clear, coherent, themes, and so it typically has been clarity, communication, and consistency. That's always been what we built upon. And in COVID, we changed that consistency to creativity, because we knew we were going to have to be different. I laugh when I think about, back to the beginning, and Eric kind of referenced it. Yeah, I still remember that, the packet pickups where we were stapling together, copies of handouts and just giving parents anything we could possibly give. We weren't set up yet in Google Classroom. We didn't have Screencastify and Edpuzzle and Pear Deck and all these digital tools that we know now really are effective for teachers, and quite frankly, they're still in the toolbox. And that's one of the pieces I'm proud of. What we've done during COVID, we have expanded our skill set. We have been able to say, what can we take from this, really adverse situation, and it can still make a difference for our kids. So that was a piece. One of the pieces that I think is critical. Certainly the collaboration with our external colleagues is key, but we collaborated even more with our leadership associations, our teachers associations, our classified associations. We always had, I think, a productive relationship, but as we went through, just like we met with external, superintendents once a week, we met with our associations once a week. And that was me and our assistant superintendent. And if it needed to be human resources, it was them too. But just to make sure we kept the dialogue going. That way there were no surprises. What you can't have really in any situation, but especially in really an adverse situation, is one message from the administration, from the leadership, and another message from the association. We made sure that clarity and communication was key. And then the last piece, and I'm going to butcher this line, but it was one that I used throughout with our teachers, and kind of led off my State of the Schools last year with it. The oak stood strong against the windstorm and crumbled, right? It broke it, and the willow kind of bent with the winds, and it survived. And we had to be the willow. We had to be able to really adapt and realize that none of us chose to be in this situation. Our kids especially didn't choose to be in this situation, but let's go ahead and be creative and make the best of it.
Yeah.
I want to just echo what Charlie said, particularly also about our labor unions and our principal association. I have 9 unions and a principal association. Every one of them and their members stood up in ways that none of us would have imagined pre. And, again, if you look at urban districts across the country, many of them were brawling in the streets while we were quietly figuring out how to get all this done. We had one little blip when we were trying to open that actually ended up being more about communication. We solved it in 2 days, right? But I cannot say enough about our labor unions and our principal association and our people. I mean, one of the things we've seen across the country is huge attrition out of the field. We actually have our lowest attrition in the last 3 years, and I attribute that to our people, just feeling like mission requires us to figure out how to do this great for our kids. And also a calling that we will come out of this stronger and a more fair, just, and good system where we are not going through all of this just to get back to what was. So I also want to echo what Charlie said, that just there was a lot of amazing people making things happen that we would have never dreamed of. We actually, again, weren't digitally connected. And so we also bought all kinds of new tools. We kind of went overboard. Our teachers were saying, whoa, 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 I don't even know which one to use. So we're now kind of for this year calling back which ones were the ones that worked best to give a tighter toolbox that our kids and families can depend on as well.
Yeah, incredible. With everything that has happened, obviously we enter another academic calendar of uncertainty. Charlie, beyond the existential threat that the actual virus poses, what's the greatest challenge to the school year in your district? What's the greatest opportunity? And what's your message tonight for parents as kids get set to go back to school next week?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is that continued lack of clarity. We again, I referenced that as a core value before. To improve performance, right, you have to be very clear about what you expect of people, and that's one of the pieces that we really have stressed, as we've gone along, and we've built a really phenomenal team in Parma. And it's hard to create that. We all want to know, what next week's going to look like, what the week after is going to look like, what exactly we will need to do, and it's challenging to create that. And as much as we want to give definitive answers, we've learned that definitive answers are set up for failure in COVID. I think the greatest opportunity is to continue to grow as a healthy organization. Again, these are sort of corny, hokey terms, but a healthy organization means that we don't talk about each other, we talk to each other. We don't sit on our hands and just kind of let frustrations boil, and then eventually we're in some kind of street fight. Like Eric said before, we talk through our issues and we work together and we collaborate. And when you have a healthy organization, that's where creativity can thrive. When you have people who are able to work across departments and come up with ideas that fix multiple problems, with one simple solution, that's where an organization can get better. And we've one of the things I'm most proud of is, despite the fact that we've been shackled by COVID, and I use that term a lot because I think that's what COVID largely did, was shackle us. At the same time, we were innovative, and we have new programs in place. We want to be a one-stop shop for our Parma families. This is all since COVID started. We have an ACES program for students with autism, with kindergarten launch for our youngest kindergarten students that are typically would have had to sit home and wait for kindergarten a year, or they would have been too young to really survive in kindergarten. They'd be running all over the place. So that type of innovation can occur when you have a healthy organization. And I think we have a continued commitment to building upon that. So I think that's really the hope and then the upside of this year. From a message to parents, please take this seriously. And I know we're getting some pushback. Well, you're not taking it seriously. You don't have a mask mandate. Well, right now we're strongly recommending. And I will tell you that when you are wearing a mask, your instance of having to quarantine is almost nil. If you can get a vaccine, get one. Again, we're going to offer it this week at Byers Field, 10 to 12. Just come up and get one for 12-year-olds and over. These are very serious. It's a very serious variant that we're dealing with. We will take it seriously in school. We need parents to relay this to their students. I will wear a mask certainly anytime I'm with around students, and I expect that our faculty and staff will do the same. It is a very serious issue. It still is a serious issue. We're all exhausted by COVID, and yet it is still a very real part of our lives.
Yeah. Eric, to you, the greatest challenge, opportunity, and message to parents as CMSD gets to start on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie said it really well, and I've been using the language that the pandemic isn't over, the shutdown is. And so last year, this year we have to learn to live in a pandemic. Last year we didn't live in a pandemic, we shut down, right? So I'll skip over that we do need clarity, all of that. But beyond that, for me, the biggest challenge, and I need our community to understand, is because we were so busy dealing with remote and hybrid and all the things that came with it, all of the traditional planning we would have normally done for fall is running late. And so I do need people to have a little space and grace if, in fact, things aren't 100%. I actually am really confident in where we are in readiness for school, but I have to say, we planned our summer experience in 4 weeks. We planned fall in 6 weeks. Normally, we would have spent 6 months getting ready for fall, right? And we had a summer school that was turnkey. And so, and all of that happened because we were so busy dealing with the shutdown and the effects of the shutdown that we couldn't do the normal business. And so I've called Monday the horizon line, because the mirage has finally turned into something we're going to achieve. We're going to get to that horizon line. But that was and still is a challenge in simple things like back to school mailers that went out later than they normally would have, right? Creating shorter windows for families to have all of the information we want, as just an example. The greatest opportunity is, and again, we prototyped it in our summer experience, is the opportunity for us to innovate. My team has heard me quote Audre Lorde hundreds of times through this, that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And the master's house is dismantled. We get to pick up new tools and be a better system, a more fair, just, and good system, if we don't go back to normal, which was not great for my kids and families, even despite 10 years of work I'm very, very proud of. And so, we have really worked hard, like Charlie, to innovate and to do any number of things. We have 16 large investments we're making across the system to really make sure that our students have the opportunity to finish, enrich, and engage. And I'm super excited about it. And we proved over summer with 8,400 kids that learning can be joyful and adventurous, like it should be. And we want that to carry forward. And then the thing I want my families to know is our families gave us an appropriate amount of space and grace, and we all went through this together. We are still going through a pandemic together. Space and grace is going to continue to be important. We can have problems, but how we treat each other when those problems occur matters so much. And I can't tell you how just kind our families were, even when they were raising an issue to me, to say, this is a problem and I need help. And we would try to address it. They would respond and say, I can't imagine what this is like, and thank you for it. And those spaces and graces are what I think brought our educators through this, and what kept them at, why our attrition is so low is because, through maybe the worst experience we will ever go through, kindness ended up mattering, and it will continue to be important as we go into this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Great words to finish on. And, speaking personally here and from the heart, our colleagues at the Cleveland Public Library, this is central to their mission. They are the people's university, and everything they have done to engage with the communities wherever there's a branch has been nothing short of heroic. And I want to applaud our colleagues at the Cleveland Public Library. Also at 19 News, I feel like as journalists, we serve our best purpose when we function as a utility, and helping families throughout the pandemic. And as we get set to enter another academic year, the challenge is right before us. But it's discussions like this that can facilitate families getting a leg up on the school year. And finally, as a husband and a father of two young boys, I just want to thank you and stress the importance that you as educators play in the lives of so many children and so many parents who send their kids off to schools across Northeast Ohio, knowing that they have individuals such as yourselves who are passionate, capable, experienced, and caring. So thank you both so much for this conversation tonight. Best of luck for the upcoming school year. I know we'll be in touch communication-wise, as you stressed, to make sure things go well. And I want to make sure that we connect off screen so I can share some of that information on the upcoming vaccination clinics. So on behalf of everyone at the Cleveland Public Library and 19 News, I'd like to thank CMSD CEO Eric Gordon and Parma Superintendent Dr. Charles Smialek for joining us tonight. I'm Chris Tanaka saying thanks and good evening.
Thank you.